Archaeologists found a total of 35 bottles in Mount Vernon cellar during a revitalization project.
We think we know George Washington, the icon, the general, the president. We definitely think we know his home, Mount Vernon. But we were wrong. Archaeologists were just doing a routine repair drilling into the foundation when they hit something. What they pulled up from beneath the mansion floor isn't just an artifact, it's a 250-year-old message, perfectly preserved in glass. And it's forcing historians to question everything they thought they knew about America's origin story, starting with what and who was hidden right under their feet. A shocking find at Mount Vernon. It was supposed to be a routine fix. Mount Vernon, the iconic home of George Washington, is old. We're talking over 250 years old, and houses that old need constant work. In 2024, a major revitalization project was underway, not to find treasure, but just to keep the mansion from falling apart. The goal was simple: shore up the foundation. But here's the catch: you can't just bring in a backhoe. This is Mount Vernon. Every shovelful of dirt is a potential piece of history. Archaeologists were carefully, painstakingly digging beneath the mansion's main structure. They were working in the cellar, a space visitors rarely see. They expected to find what they always find: construction debris, maybe some broken pottery, animal bones from old meals, or a few rusty nails from the 1700s standard stuff. Then the trowel hit something that wasn't dirt or a loose stone. It was the edge of a brick structure. But this structure wasn't on any of Washington's original plans. And get this, it seemed to be a sealed chamber. The team, led by Mount Vernon's principal archaeologist, Jason Burrows, knew they were onto something. They cleared away more earth and realized they had found a hidden cellar, a low-ceilinged room about 12 feet across with a packed earth floor. It had been intentionally sealed off, forgotten by history. The crazy part is what was inside. As flashlights cut through the centuries-old darkness, they revealed rows of objects covered in grime. They weren't chests or tools, they were bottles. Dozens of glass bottles standing upright in shallow trenches lined with sand. The team just froze. Archaeologists never find this. They find fragments, 1,000-piece puzzles. They don't find a complete stage scene. They counted 35 bottles in total. 29 of them were perfectly intact, sealed with cork and wax. The glass itself was a wow factor, thick, green, and bubbled, the telltale sign of early American or British manufacturing from the mid-18th century. But what really made their hearts stop was what was inside. Through the murky glass, they could see organic material, dark shapes suspended in liquid. It wasn't wine. It wasn't vinegar. It was fruit. Whole fruit. The team, with surgical precision, began the extraction. Each bottle was photographed, numbered, and immediately rushed to a controlled lab. This was an archaeological miracle. In a world where history vanishes into dust, they had found a literal liquid-filled time capsule from before the United States was even a country. The air in that hidden room hadn't been breathed by anyone for maybe 2.5 centuries. Initial analysis was baffling. The bottles were full of cherries and berries, possibly gooseberries or currants. The stems were neatly trimmed. They were perfectly, impossibly preserved. Some bottles still held liquid, which scientists now think was some kind of cordial or fortified beverage. This wasn't just old trash. This was a deliberate, careful act of preservation. Someone, 250 years ago, had prepared this fruit, bottled it, and stored it in this secret room. The question was, who and why? This find wasn't just a curiosity, it was a clue. Building Mount Vernon. To understand why a hidden cellar is such a big deal, you have to understand Mount Vernon itself. Everyone's obsessed with this house. It's not just a building, it's a symbol of George Washington. But what most people don't realize is that it wasn't always the grand estate we see on the back of the quarter. When Washington first got the property in 1754, it was a modest 1.5-story house, barely 6 rooms. He inherited it from his half-brother Lawrence, but Washington had a vision. He wasn't just a general, he was a self-taught architect and a serious farmer. He saw this bluff overlooking the Potomac River and pictured an American paradise. Over the next 4 decades, he poured his life into expanding it. He personally designed the additions. Studying architectural books from Britain, he transformed that small house into an elegant 21-room mansion. And get this, the house isn't stone. It looks like it, right? That's an illusion. It's actually wood. But Washington used a technique called rustication. He had the wooden siding cut and beveled, then covered it in paint mixed with sand. From a distance, it looked just like expensive cut stone. It was a classic Washington move, ambitious, practical, and very image-conscious. The inside was just as planned. The long, breezy central hall was designed to catch the river breeze and act as a natural air conditioner. The famous cupola on the roof? It wasn't just for looks. It was a ventilation shaft pulling hot air up and out of the house. Washington was a details guy. By the 1770s, right when those bottles were being stored, Mount Vernon was a massive operation. We're talking 8,000 acres. That's over 12 square miles. It was divided into 5 separate farms with names like Dog Run and Muddy Hole. It had its own fisheries, a gristmill, and even a distillery. It was a self-contained community, an experiment in American self-sufficiency. Washington's journals are filled with notes on crop rotation, soil types, and even the number of nails needed for a new barn. For generations, historians and archaeologists thought they knew this place inside and out. They had Washington's detailed letters, his diaries, his farm reports. The house itself seemed to be an open book, but the story of Mount Vernon was never just about George Washington. The estate and its illusion of gentlemanly leisure was built and run by the forced labor of hundreds of people. At the time of Washington's passing, over 300 enslaved individuals lived and worked across those 5 farms. They built the structures, plowed the fields, cooked the meals, and crafted the goods. Their story for so long was told only in fragments, broken pottery, pipe stems, and small personal items found in the dirt. Their contributions were etched into every brick, but their names were mostly absent from the grand histories. That's why this discovery is so powerful. It wasn't found in the grand dining room, it was found in the foundation, in a hidden functional space. But how did the house even survive to be studied at all? Rescuing an icon. The crazy part is, Mount Vernon almost didn't survive. After George and Martha Washington passed away, the estate was passed down through the family. But here's the deal. Maintaining an 8,000-acre estate is expensive. By the mid-1800s, the mansion was in rough shape. We're talking crumbling. The roof leaked, plaster was falling, the grand veranda was sagging. The Washington family just couldn't afford the upkeep. Tourists would come by steamboat and literally rip souvenirs off the walls and railings. The home of the father of our country was becoming a ruin. The U.S. government was offered the chance to buy it and said no. Then, in 1853, a Virginia writer named Anne Pamela Cunningham saw the ruin from a riverboat. She was shocked. She wrote a public letter not to politicians but to the women of America. Her message was simple. If the men won't save Washington's home, the women will. This was a radical idea. Women couldn't vote. They had very little political power, but Anne Cunningham formed the Mount Vernon Ladies Association, an all-female, privately funded group. Their goal? Raise the $200,000 needed to buy the mansion and 200 acres of the estate. That's like raising over $7 million today. They did it. Through bake sales, small donations, and local campaigns, these women raised the money. In 1858, they purchased Mount Vernon. This wasn't just a real estate deal, it was the birth of the historic preservation movement in America. These women were the pioneers. They even kept the estate safe during the Civil War. Mount Vernon became a rare zone of neutrality. The Ladies Association insisted that both Union and Confederate soldiers visiting the grounds leave their weapons at the gate, and they did. The estate became a quiet reminder of a united country, even as that country was tearing itself apart. For over 160 years, the Mount Vernon Ladies Association has owned and operated the estate. They've done it with no government funding. Every repair, every archaeological dig, every historical program is funded by donations and ticket sales. They are the guardians of this legacy. Which brings us back to that cellar. The current mansion revitalization project is part of that same unbroken promise Anne Pamela Cunningham made in 1853. It's a multi-million-dollar, multi-year effort to stabilize the house for another 250 years. And it was during this act of careful preservation that the house finally gave up one of its biggest secrets. The secret wasn't just bottles, it was what was in them. DNA from the past. So here's the deal. Finding 35 old bottles is cool. Finding 29 of them intact is amazing. But finding them full of perfectly preserved 250-year-old fruit, that's not just history, that's science. As soon as the bottles were in the lab, scientists got to work, and the details are just mind-blowing. The first thing they did was a chemical analysis of the liquid. It suggested an early fermentation, meaning this was likely a homemade cordial, a cherry bounce, or some kind of preserved drink. Basically 18th century high-proof fruit juice. But the fruit itself is the real story. Botanists got involved. They looked at the cherries under a microscope and could still see the cellular detail. The pits were intact. The stems were neatly trimmed, a sign of careful preparation. They also found gooseberries or currants mixed in. Now the USDA Agricultural Research Service is involved. Why? DNA. What most people don't realize is that the fruit we eat today is almost nothing like the fruit George Washington ate. The apples, cherries, and berries of the 18th century were heirloom varieties. They've been lost to time, replaced by modern versions bred for sugar content, shelf life, and shipping. These bottles are a biological time capsule. Scientists are now extracting DNA from these ancient fruits. They hope to identify the exact heirloom varieties that were growing in Washington's gardens in the 1770s. And get this, they are testing the seeds for germination. There is a real scientific possibility that they could grow a cherry tree from Washington's time. Imagine in a few years cultivating the exact same fruit that was picked and bottled before the Declaration of Independence was even signed. This find is already rewriting what we know about colonial food preservation. We read about putting up fruits in old recipes, but these bottles are the physical evidence. They show a sophisticated, effective method of keeping food safe and edible long before modern refrigeration or canning. The high alcohol content liquid, the airtight seals, this was high-tech for its time. It also gives us a tangible link to the tastes and smells of the past. We can't just read about their diet, we can now analyze it. This find offers a literal taste of the 18th century, a direct connection to the daily life of the people who walked these halls. But the biggest question remained: who actually did all this work? A story, sealed in glass. Okay, so we have this incredible discovery, a hidden cellar, perfectly preserved fruit, and amazing science. But this is where the story gets real. This is where it starts to rewrite America's origin. When we think of Mount Vernon, we think of George Washington. But Washington wasn't in the kitchen. He wasn't in the gardens trimming cherry stems. He was a general, a politician, a plantation manager. The work, the sophisticated, skilled, scientific work of preserving this food, was done by someone else. It was done by the enslaved individuals of the estate. The archaeological team believes these bottles are directly connected to the kitchen and to one person in particular. Her name was Doll. Doll was the head cook at Mount Vernon, brought to the estate by Martha Washington in 1759. She lived and worked there for decades under brutal conditions. She was responsible for preparing and preserving all the food for the Washingtons' main table, a table that hosted the most important people in the new nation. What we're looking at in these bottles isn't just fruit. It's Doll's skill, it's her knowledge, it's her labor sealed in glass. This wasn't just a simple chore, this was advanced food science. Doll and people like her were masters of horticulture, chemistry, and preservation. They knew which fruits to pick, when to pick them, how to prepare them, and how to create a preserving liquid that would last for centuries. So here's the deal. The American origin story we're often told is one of singular great men. Washington, Jefferson, Franklin. We credit them with the nation's innovation. But this discovery, buried in the literal foundation of America's most iconic home, tells a different story. It proves that the real ingenuity, the practical science that allowed these communities to thrive, often came from the enslaved people whose names were left out of the history books. Doll was an expert, a chef, a scientist. These bottles are her legacy. They are a testament to the skill, resilience, and knowledge of the enslaved community that built and sustained America. The discovery is forcing a shift in the narrative. We're no longer just looking at Washington's house, we're looking at Doll's pantry. This find proves history is hidden right beneath our feet. What other great man of history was actually standing on the work of forgotten people? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.